Well, good morning again. So I never know quite what to do when I have changed the message on you. So for those of you who are looking at your bulletin and be like, oh, I love this story. Sorry. We're doing something different today. Yeah, maybe next time. Keep coming back and maybe sometime we'll do it. So I'm going to read to you from Philippians. Not from Luke. This is Philippians chapter 3, verse 10. It starts like this. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you have renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you've been concerned, but you've had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. So this is good, right? May not be the 10 lepers, but you're like, okay, all right, I see where we're going. So it's the Sunday before Thanksgiving. Hopefully, you're already finding reasons to be thankful. Hopefully the small exercise that we started with at the very beginning was a way to kind of prime the pump for you. The thing about thankfulness is it's just so basic and valuable a practice for our lives, but it also doesn't get as much focus as maybe it should have. Here's the thing about being thankful. Like, you don't have to be especially smart. You don't have to have degrees. You don't really have to know much to understand the value of it. It's not hard if you think about it to see the benefits, the difference of when I'm thankful or when I'm not. Like, we can see the difference in our attitude and our outlook. And it's not actually that difficult to put into practice, is it? Being thankful. But it's strangely easy to overlook or neglect this really easy thing called thankfulness. So if you're like me, sometimes thankfulness just comes easy. It's one of those seasons of life and it just feels like it flows. Other times, thankfulness can feel a little bit more like a discipline. Right? Where your feelings aren't quite lining up with what you're trying to express. And so it can feel a little more like a discipline, especially if life has been hard or frustrating or challenging. Like, that stuff sometimes seems to kind of choke out gratitude. Is that just me? Okay, maybe it is. So this is for me today. So let me do this. I'm going to take you all the way back to Thanksgiving a year ago. And I'm sure you all remember that message. Just nod and smile. I wouldn't have remembered it if I hadn't looked at my notes, to be honest. So back a year ago, leading into Thanksgiving, we talked about how there's two parts of being thankful. So there's the thinking part, where I think of the reasons I'm thankful. And then there's the active thanking part, which is the expression of my thankfulness. And so we called it reflection and expression, like reflecting on what I'm thankful for and then expressing what I'm thankful for. And here's the thing that we kind of sorted out a little bit is, so you can feel thankful, like there's some things up here that I'm thankful for, but I never express that. So I would refer to that as unacknowledged thankfulness. And then we can also express thanks, but not really think through that. So those are the times like when you say thank you because it's the polite thing to do, but you weren't really feeling that. You know what I'm talking about? And so here's what we kind of unpacked is that if you leave out the reflection or the expression, you just do one or the other, your thankfulness is incomplete. It requires both parts, the reflection and the expression. kind of giving your thankfulness voice, not just thinking of it in your head. So I want to build on that a little bit as we head into Thanksgiving this year. I want us to talk a little more about how to be thankful. Again, it's not hard, but somehow it can elude us. But this is a core attitude, a core posture, you might call it, that will directly affect how we see life. And the piece I want to talk about today is something that will directly affect your ability to be thankful. It's this core attitude that is contentment. A large part of being thankful comes down to this often elusive attitude of contentment. So how that plays out in real life is if you're less content in some areas of your life, it just follows that you're going to be less thankful. And if you're more content in some areas of your life, it follows that you're going to be more thankful. So our level of contentment will directly affect our degree of thankfulness. So we're going to look at this thing today called contentment, and we're going to unpack it a little bit. We're going to be in Philippians 3. We read those verses together where Paul talks about learning to be content. So first thing I want to call your attention to here, we often think of contentment as being happy with your stuff, right? Not always wanting more. And while there is something to that, especially in a consumer culture, which is what we live in, right? In a consumer culture, this is something we have to deal with all the time. I don't know if you know this, but all of those advertisements that show up on your computer and on your TV and your devices, every single advertisement that comes in front of you is pressing against this thing called contentment. Wanting you to look away from what you have and be like, well, you know, and then you look to something else. So there is something to this, right? Learning to be content and not always wanting more. Really simply, contentment, if you can stay in that place, will take away your drive of greed and envy. It'll take some of the power from that. But here's how I would describe contentment. So contentment learns to want what we have rather than what we don't. So I chose the word want here because we might say like or be okay with what you have. But the idea of contentment is I see what I have, and not only do I like it, and I'm like, I mean, that's fine. I can live with it. It's not that. It's like, no, I'm good. I'm thankful, and I want that. That's the idea of contentment. Thankful for what I have, not focused on what I don't have. But there's a bigger piece of contentment that I want us to kind of unpack today because it's really an attitude and a posture that affects kind of our whole outlook on life. So with that in mind, I want us to start with this in Philippians 3, these verses we read together. I want us to start by understanding where Paul is coming from. So the letter to the Philippians is one of Paul's letters that we call a prison letter or a prison epistle. Anybody want to guess why? He's in prison when he wrote this, right? So here's what I want you to catch. Paul is writing from prison about contentment. Okay, I'm listening, right? Like, that's not what we would say is, now that's a place of contentment. So Paul writes these words. He's in prison, probably in Rome, probably chained between a couple of guards. Again, not what any of us would imagine is, and that's the kind of place where you would find contentment. And it's in this setting, between two guards, in chains, that Paul writes, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. So it's out of that context that Paul is sharing with us something that he's learned. So I want us to stop and catch that word. Paul had to learn this. So it wasn't something he just had that you don't have. It wasn't something that he just woke up one day with and said, you know what, I'm just content, no matter what. It's not something he was zapped with in a moment, which means this. He had his struggles with contentment, like we do. That he had to work some things out. He had to figure some things out. So think of it like this, like Paul saying, I got to be honest with you. I didn't always do the contentment thing well. But I have learned some things. I have learned through effort over time as I've navigated circumstances. Sometimes I've done it well, sometimes not as well. But as I've gone through the ups and downs of life, like many of us, right? Life has its ups and downs. He says, I've learned to be content. So when life goes up and down, when we lack contentment, here's what happens. We go up and down with it, right? So Paul says, oh, I've done it. I've done the ups and the downs. I've had the good and the bad, and I've gone up and down with it. And here's how he says it. I know what it is to be in need. So that's where I am currently. I'm in prison, right? I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty, and I've experienced those times when I've had more than what I've needed. But in all of that, I have learned something about contentment. So Paul's point here is not really to celebrate having enough or being in need. He's saying, I've experienced all sides of this, and I've learned to be content either way. Now, I'll speak for me. Like, I read these things and I'm like, but if you could choose, like, which would you rather have, right? And that's fine. It's not an unfair question, but I will say it's a little bit of a bogus question. Because here's what we all know. Did you choose all of your ups and downs? You did not, did you? We just get them. And so while it may seem like a legit question to say, but if you could choose, because here's the reality, you don't get to choose your ups and downs. But we do get to choose our attitude. We do get to choose our outlook. And so here's what Paul is saying to us, writing from prison, that what I've learned is that my joy and my attitude does not have to go up and down with my circumstances. That's pretty big, isn't it? Like, what if we could figure that one out? So he says, having plenty or being in need, I've figured out I don't have to bounce up and down with those extremes. And so, again, like, here's me, like, maybe not you, but I'm like, really? Either way, you're good. And Paul, again, uses this word. He said, I am, but I had to figure this out. I had to learn this thing, contentment. So here's the other word that I want you to see. He says, I've learned the secret of contentment. Secret. So secret, we think, shh, don't tell, right? But how he means secret is, a lot of people don't know about this. It's not a secret because we don't talk about it. It's a secret because people just don't know. And he says, so here's what I learned, this secret that so many don't know about, this hidden truth that was unknown to me in the ups and downs and unknown to so many others because we tend to see contentment as a byproduct of having plenty or things being good and right. It almost feels like an undebatable truth. You want contentment? Well, things have to line up appropriately for you to be content. And while it seems kind of self-evident that contentment comes out of those places, Paul's saying, but it's not like that. Contentment, it's a choice. It's a mindset. It's an attitude. So here's what we know, living in a consumer culture. You can have plenty and still want more, can't you? I don't remember where it was. Famously, someone was asked, a millionaire, how much is enough? And he said, just a little bit more. Right? And it doesn't matter where you are in the spectrum. It always feels like, more would be better. Right? So here's what we know. You can have a lot of good. You can have what you need and more and still be unsatisfied. In other words, good and plenty doesn't necessarily automatically lead us to contentment. The simple truth is this: life can be good, and our discontentedness can be ever present. On the other side, life can be hard, and contentment can be ever present. It's one of those things that when we sit with it, when you hear Paul describe this, you're like, yes, that. I want to do that. I want to figure that out. I don't want to bounce up and down. I want to choose that thing, to have that mindset, to walk in that attitude. So I don't use the Greek words a lot, but the Greek word, so the New Testament is written in Greek, and the original word, the Greek word that Paul uses here, which we translate contentment, literally is a word for self-sufficient. So think that one through. When I'm self-sufficient, I'm not dependent on anyone or anything else. So what Paul is describing here is this healthy attitude, this healthy outlook that is free from the ups and downs of life. So this is a really good way to think through contentment. Self-sufficient is a really helpful word. It clarifies that this attitude or outlook is not tied to my circumstances. And so the secret that Paul had to learn, the one that it took him a while to figure out, but now he's learned it, is the secret of contentment. He's learned to operate with a consistent attitude of contentment in the midst of inconsistent circumstances. Again, ever feel like, yeah, how do I do that? So if you look up the word contentment in your modern dictionary, you're going to find definitions something like this. It's satisfaction. It's ease of mind. A couple of words that come to mind moving it into the spiritual realm are peace and thankfulness. Peace and thankfulness are part of the contented life. In my mind, I picture this like a braided rope. So that's why I've got your graphic up there with peace and thankfulness kind of wound together to create this rope of contentment. The cord of peace and the cord of thankfulness come together to form this thing we call contentment. So when we're content, right, you have peace of mind. You have this sense of thankfulness. If you flip that around, when we have peace and thankfulness, those are really good signs that you're living in contentment. So peace is like I'm good, I'm at rest, instead of churning or being restless, wanting more. Thankful, meaning I look around with appreciation, seeing what's right and good. So that's the signs that you've got contentment. Let's talk about some of the signs that it might be missing. When we lack contentment, one of the things you may notice is there's kind of a general tendency toward dissatisfaction. So when I am lacking contentment, I see the gaps in my life. I see what's missing. I'm unsettled with where I am and what I have. There's a churning, right? And that causes me to spin a little bit. And the more you focus on those gaps and those lacks, the louder that sense of dissatisfaction becomes. So I lack this peace, right? Living with this feeling of dissatisfaction. And often it's not up front. It's kind of like riding in the background. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's not like it's just always there and I'm miserable, but it just kind of like nags in the back of your mind. It's kind of like an undercurrent. Not necessarily obvious, but always pulling. So here's how it plays out. Let's just throw it into your work world. If we have a job, well, we dream of a better job. Maybe a bigger job, a more important job, a job that's closer to home, a job with a bigger office, a better boss, better coworkers, better benefits, one that's more challenging for me personally, and I get to define the terms of challenge, one that's a bigger opportunity, one that's just got nicer people on all sides, one that gives me more vacation time. Now, none of those things are necessarily bad, but if those are the gaps you constantly see, you can imagine how it shouldn't surprise you that for some reason I'm not loving my job, right? When that's what you focus on. And the same attitude, the same way of thinking applies across every category, right? Your house, your cars, your neighborhood, your community, your friends, your families, your possessions, all works the same way with this undercurrent of dissatisfaction. When we lack contentment, we find countless reasons to be not just dissatisfied, but disappointed. That's it. That's all I have. Could be better, but this is what it is. And the sense of disappointment and dissatisfaction just feeds the lack of contentment. So when we lack contentment, we have this general tendency toward dissatisfaction. When we continue to walk in that, we start to express our discontent. So if you spin on that stuff long enough, it's not just going to stay in your head. It's going to come out into the world. So you start keeping track of the things, what's wrong, what's broken, what needs to be fixed, and you carry it with you and you carry it in your head. So think of it this way, it's like having a complaint department in your head. And you keep coming up to the counter and saying, okay, can I talk to somebody? Right? This is what it's like. And eventually, those complaints that are happening in your head start finding their way into the world. So Jesus said it this way, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Meaning what's going on in here finds its way out into the world. So let's think of it practically. So if you are unhappy, dissatisfied, I want you to just envision that you are carrying around a complaint box. And so everywhere you go, you have your complaint box. So imagine coming in on Sunday morning and somebody's holding a box and you're like, what's that? Oh, it's a complaint box. Really? Now, if you're dissatisfied, you're like, that is a great idea, right? You're like, why did we not think of that earlier? Our church should have a complaint box. But keep going, right? You go to Thanksgiving dinner. There's your box. Just going to sit that in the middle of the table right there. And they're like, what is that? That's a complaint box. That's a great idea for Thanksgiving dinner. We should have a complaint box. And here's what I want you to, like, it sounds goofy, but when we walk around dissatisfied, it's like we're carrying around our complaint box, and everywhere we go, we drop that on the table or in the setting. So wherever it is, you can have it at your house, you can have it at your friend's house, you can have it in your car, you can have it at work, you can have it at church. Here's my complaint box. And here's the thing, right? If somebody walks in that door with a complaint box, you and I automatically know you have complaints. That's why you thought this was a great idea. And I agreed with you because I have complaints. Here's what I want you to see, that if you carry that complaint box, here's why. You are not carrying this so everybody else can air their complaints. They may use it too. I'm carrying this because I've got complaints. So as you head to your Thanksgiving dinner, let me just invite you to consider, if you're bringing a box with you, maybe don't bring that in. Now we're back to Paul saying, oh, I've learned a secret, because you're like, man, that box just comes with me to think, you don't know my family. Like, you would have a complaint box too if you knew my family, right? And here's what Paul is saying. I don't have to know your family. I've learned this secret of being content, whatever the circumstances. So when we lack contentment, we have a consistent tendency toward dissatisfaction. We start to express that discontent, and then the more we do it, the more we focus on what's wrong instead of what's right. So here's what I want you to see, that this brings you to the very opposite place of thankfulness, isn't it? Thankfulness focuses on what's good and right. Grumbling and complaining focuses on what's broken and messed up. It's the very opposite. It's this attitude. It's this perspective that we bring to life. I came across a story this week, a story of two old friends who bumped into one another on the street one day, and one of them looked just downcast and distraught, almost on the verge of tears, and his friends asked him, he's like, what has the world done to you that leaves you so sad? And he said, I got to tell you, 3 weeks ago, the great aunt, who I hardly even knew, she passed away, and I inherited almost $1 million. And his friend's like, okay, that's a lot of money. And he said, yeah, well, then 2 weeks ago, a cousin I never knew died and left me $85,000. And he's like, okay, that sounds like you've been blessed. And he's like, oh, you don't understand. Last week, I had an uncle that died, and he left me $40,000. And he's like, I am not following where we're going here. Like, what is it that's got you so distraught? And he said, this week, nothing. Like, that's the problem, right? Like, we focus on what we don't have instead of what we do. See, this is the problem with discontentment. It focuses on what's wrong and misses what's right. It sees what I should have, could have, would have, instead of appreciating what I do. When we lack contentment, to use a biblical idea, instead of being thankful that my cup runs over, I'm disappointed that my mug isn't bigger to hold more. When we are content, we have peace and satisfaction in our hearts. We are thankful, and we express that thanks. And it helps us appreciate what's right and what's good. Paul describes this touching every part of life, right? I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. And it's not just about having a lot or a little and being content with that. Again, Paul's in prison. It'd be pretty easy for Paul, right, to see what's broken and messed up here. Like, I am in prison. I am chained between two guards. I feel like I've got this mission to build up churches, but I can't do that because I'm in prison. Like, his vision, his mission is radically impacted by where he finds himself. And so, he's reduced to writing letters instead of meeting these people face to face. You could see how you'd be like, you could get a little bit jaded, right? Like, God, it has just been my mission to serve you, but here I am, and all I can do is write these silly letters. I can't actually go talk to anybody. Like, surely God could intervene. Here's what we know, though. Had Paul not written these letters and been in prison, we wouldn't have a large portion of our New Testament, would we? That God was doing something there that was bigger, beyond just Paul's circumstances. He says, I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, including prison. And you get this sense, like even as he say it, there's this peace and this thankfulness, this gratitude in his heart. Let me just say this, because so I'm a question asker, like, yeah, but, that's me. So my yeah, but would be, but I mean, like there are just situations that we find ourselves, like there's nothing to like there, right? Like, Paul, there's nothing to like about being in prison. And being content doesn't mean you have to like everything that's happening in your life. I mean, I doubt Paul liked being in prison. I doubt that that's what he would choose if he had the option to choose. Like, yeah, I mean, I would rather not be in prison. So, like, I don't know all the stories. I don't know what your year has been like. Maybe it's just been a brutal year. Maybe you're in the middle of the mess right now. Stuff going on. And contentment doesn't mean like, it's fine. It's just my mess. I'm okay. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean you downplay it or ignore it. It means whatever your situation, even if you're saying, I don't like this, that you find a way to give thanks for what is right, and you continue to ask God for peace in those circumstances that you don't like. And if you can give thanks and begin to experience God's peace, then you can be content in circumstances where you never imagined being content. So it's taking your present situation, contentment's taking your present situation, whatever obstacles you're facing, whatever limitations you're living with, whatever chronic condition is wearing you down, whatever has smashed your dreams, like whatever you've got, you don't have to go up and down with those circumstances. So I want to give you this last piece as we wrap up. So this is verse 13. It's a familiar verse that we usually just take on its own, but it's written in this context of being content no matter what. Paul says, I can do everything through him who gives me strength. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So here's how I want to invite you to think of that as we close this out. So we described this rope with the two strands of contentment, right? You've got peace and you've got thankfulness. But maybe let's add a third strand in here. Christ that gives me strength. So peace, thankfulness, but then one more thing that takes me beyond me. Christ who gives me strength. So not a 2-strand rope, but a 3-strand rope. And this sense of confidence, it's this trust, this relentless belief that God is good and he will give me what I need in whatever my circumstances. That he's at work. Just like Paul, like in prison writing letters, like this is not how I want to do ministry. And yet here we are reading his letter because that's where he was and that's how he did ministry. So there's a sense of being okay because I believe God sees more than what I see. That I believe God can make beauty from ashes. That I believe God can take something permanent and lasting out of my temporary circumstances. Again, so Paul's situation, he was in prison temporarily, but what is permanent and lasting is the fruit of that contentment and the letters that he's written that we read today. So trusting God, whatever the mess you're in right now, and asking him for his peace. Saying, here's my reasons to be thankful. Here's the things that I can say, this gives me peace. And then Christ in me is filling in those gaps. Another way to think of it is contentment fuels the heart with endless reasons to praise God. As you head into Thanksgiving this week, there are all kinds of things that can strike us as reasons to be unsatisfied. Things aren't how they should be or how I'd like them to be. And so you got your box, right? Here's my invitation for you. Maybe let's start with Thanksgiving, and then we'll go from there. For Thanksgiving, I'm going to set aside my complaint box. I'm not going to bring it to the table. I'm not going to bring it to the family gathering. And it's not because everything is how it should be. It is, I am choosing to be thankful and to engage God's peace in Christ's strength this holiday. And here's my hope, because sometimes we're like, okay, forever and ever, I'm always going to be content, and then we get overwhelmed because that didn't work yesterday, right? And so the invitation is just to start with this week. and say, okay, this week, I'm going to set aside the complaint box, and I'm going to replace it with a thankful box. And then next week, after Thanksgiving, like, hopefully we can say, you know what? I like that. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to set aside the complaint box, and I'm going to have a thankful box. And just imagine that that's then what you start to carry. Instead of the box that you bring to everything you have with complaints, you're carrying your box of thanks. And here's what's really interesting, right? So just like when somebody drops the complaint box down on the table and you're like, you are so right about that. Like, now there's a person who knows what's going on, right? But thankfulness actually works the same way. You bring in your thanks box, and it's interesting how other people are like, you know what, now there's a person who sees what's going on. It works the same way. So be that person this week at your Thanksgiving dinner with your messed up dysfunctional family, right? Like, you be that person who says, you know what, I'm bringing the thankful box in, and we are going to be thankful. And you might just be surprised to discover another secret. Not just that I can be content, but that I can help other people be thankful. Who saw that coming? That is the beauty of this secret that Paul learned. I'm going to do this. I'm going to close this in prayer, and I'm going to invite us to stand, and we're going to sing a song of thankfulness together at the end. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for Paul, who has written it, a man who had himself in circumstances that were just like, I don't see much to be thankful for, and yet he describes learning this secret of being content, whatever the circumstances. I ask that as we step into Thanksgiving week, you would help us to set aside our complaint boxes and to lift up our thanks boxes, and that we bring something to the table this week that not only we appreciate, but other people can say, yes, that too. And I ask this in Jesus' name, amen.